Sharp's injuries are not just clinical statistics, they're moments of fear, anxiety, and potential long-term harm for the people who show up every day to care for others. Despite the tools available, data from the Royal College of Nursing still shows a rise in Sharp's injuries across the UK, with 32% of those occurring during the disposal process. This isn't just a safety issue, it's a workforce well-being issue, a governance issue, and ultimately a responsibility issue. So before we talk standards, Neil, why is safer Sharps containment so critical from a human and clinical perspective?
I think it's pretty obvious, Josh. I mean, why should a nurse go to work in a morning to care for people and then, potentially get the risk of being contaminated with bloodborne pathogens just for doing their role of caring for patients? I think the other side of Sharp's injuries and medical waste risk is to the portering staff and the auxiliary staff. I think they're the ones that we don't really think about. But if standards are not followed, procedures are not adhered to, then there is a great risk to those workers of contracting Sharp's injuries. Another hidden side of this is at the waste facilities. Sharpsmart obviously operates 4 waste facilities, and we actually do see huge risks for that waste management staff downstream of the clinical process, from things like poorly assembled containers that break open. We've seen penetration injuries where Sharps have pierced containers and liquid spillages. So, it's a real emotive subject for us in the waste industry for people who are not at that caring, at the forefront of that caring environment, supporting that, and obviously the nurses themselves.
What's the cost of even one Sharp's injury in a facility?
We're talking about the financial cost. Obviously, the overriding consideration here is the emotional and psychological cost to the nurses. But there was a NHS resolution study that I think looked at Sharp's injuries over a period of 10 years from, I think it was 2012 to 2022, and it was published in 2023. And I think during that time, there was 2,600 claims related to needle stick Sharp's injuries. I think it was just under 1,950 were actually what you would call successful claims, resulting in 10.8 million in compensation costs. Now, that works out around 5,500 per claim. But that isn't the cost of the downtime, the research, and like I said, the emotional damage, which is far more important to the staff that receive those Sharp's injuries. So it's still a major concern. Obviously, there is a huge cost element, and obviously there's a cost element for industry as well, where people like drivers and medical waste workers in the plants get Sharp's injuries as well. So
why does this happen, and how does container design and compliance help reduce that risk?
So basically, Sharp's injuries can happen in multiple ways. I mean, there's if you look at the in-use phase, sometimes there's some of the containers are assembled on site, and sometimes if they're not assembled correctly, then lids could be fitted incorrectly, which could mean that lids could actually fall off during use. I think with some of the designs of containers, they don't include what we would call passive safety systems, which is overfill protection. So obviously, a Sharp's container is used in a critical environment where patients are being cared for, and sometimes those containers get overfilled. So what could happen is the container's overfilled, someone puts a Sharp in there, and there could be something penetrating, or the nurse puts the syringe into the container, and there's maybe a syringe, a needle sticking out. We have seen in the past where containers, where needle technologies advanced so much, and you've got a lot of these dosing devices where there's a lot of weight behind a very fine needle. We've seen in the past that needles can penetrate containers downstream. They can actually occur because of bad placement of sharps. So, maybe in that trauma situation, a healthcare worker doesn't use the sharps container, maybe puts it on this bedside or actually on the bed. We've seen that, and basically downstream workers actually get those sharps injuries. You see a lot of the bag related injuries, nowhere near as many as we used to because the standards have obviously increased, but where porters will pick bags up and somebody's discarded a syringe into a bag instead of the sharps container. So various reasons. And then how does sharps standards help, or compliance help? Well, all the things we just talked about there, the thickness of the container, the tests that we do on the containers to make sure that they are assembled correctly, that they are dropped in various orientations to make sure that the lid doesn't come off. The labeling is really important. Obviously, when you pick a container up and it is assembled, you need to have the assembly instructions, the types of accessories that are used to make sure it's actually utilized at point of care is really critical as well. So obviously the standards, the two standards that are out there, ISO 23907 Part 1, which is for single use, and ISO 23907 Part 2 for reusables, cover the vast majority of those areas to try and eliminate needle stick injuries. So in my opinion, compliance with one or the other standard, depending on the type of container, is absolutely critical.
So, Neil, what are the figures out there and statistics that are relating to sharps injuries?
Yeah, so in 2020, I think during the production of the Royal College of Nursing Sharps study guide, Sharp Safety, sorry, during the 2020 Royal College of Nursing survey around sharps injuries, I think there was something like 7,500 nurses that were asked various questions, and incredibly, during that prior year, 15% of nurses had actually received a sharps injury during that previous 12 months, which I think is incredible. There was another statistic also that said that 63% of nurses had actually received sharps injuries in their career, and some of them more than one sharps injury. So, even with the introduction of sharps safety devices, there are still sharps injuries happening there, and obviously that doesn't cover the downstream injuries either by people like portering staff and other healthcare workers.